Hello, Heart Warriors, and welcome back to, again, we are going to talk about how we can use our hearts to find happiness. And I do apologize. Hopefully we can mitigate the little bit of echo that I hear today on this recording. We've done a lot of tech check recording, but we'll try to figure it out. So bear with us if it doesn't, because it's sort of intermittent. So one way to happiness is to tolerate technology and to not freak out when things happen, right? So today I have, this is probably going to be the highlight of our entire show, because today the model of care for feeling depressed or unhappy is just take this pill. And a lot of us don't realize that when we take this pill, it could be somewhat of a death sentence or a codependence for the rest of our lives because of the consequences of these pills. And so today we're going to focus very deeply and specifically on me. Well, okay, I'm not self-centered, but you're going to follow me and my journey. I'm going to be the depressed person. I'm going to be somebody who's experiencing some sadness in my life. And Dr. Dan Kalish is here to talk about the different paths that I have an option to take, because he's got a very, very wide approach to two different paths that we can take. And within that, different subsets of options that we have when we come to this fork in the road. And so today we're here to talk about depression. It's not to depress you guys, but to show you that there are choices, and that it's not just what the television says that we have one option to do, although that is what the majority of people are learning today to do to cope. But sadness is one, as you will hear on JP Sears' interview, it is one emotion among a spectrum of emotions. And there is a purpose and a place for sadness. So today, if we look at the definition of depression, it sounds like the average American. It's the definition of depression is 4 to 5 of the following symptoms most of the day for at least 2 weeks. And these symptoms include constant sadness, irritability, hopelessness, feeling worthless or guilty for no reason, loss of interest in favorite activities, trouble sleeping, low energy or fatigue, significant weight change or appetite. So it sounds like a lot of people, and I'm going to be that person today. The statistics today is that 11% of Americans are on antidepressants. 1 in 4 women between their 40s and 50s are on an antidepressant. Nearly 70% of people taking antidepressants may not actually have depression. So doctors are discovering that many do not meet the official criteria. Maybe it's just inflammation. We'll talk about that. Children, they're able to get a prescription in some states for it without the parents' consent, even if they're like 5 or 6 years old. And 82% of what we're calling effect in these medications can be duplicated in placebo, in some of the articles that I've seen. There is a greater prescription rate of antidepressants today than ever, and there's greater rates of mental health disability. In fact, depression is the main reason for disability today. So why, if we're prescribing more antidepressants than ever, are we still more unhappy and still off of work because of it? It's the most addicting drug that's out there right now in terms of prescriptions that I know of, that I've read about, and that Dr. Dan Kalish can comment on. So lots and lots of information here. I mean, we're going to talk about studies and stuff too. I know one thing I also heard is that the FDA only requires like 2 studies before they approve drugs. So a lot of things that you may never have heard of. So Dr. Dan Kalish, first of all, thank you so much for being here and for influencing all of the people, and welcome to Heart to Happiness.
Oh, thank you. Very glad to be here.
Yeah, we're so stoked you're here too, because you're a major life changer. You've been a major voice for this field and letting people know that they have options. And so again, you guys, we're not here to say stop taking your antidepressants because we're not your doctor, but we're going to talk about options. So I'm the woman coming on, and I am depressed. There's some things that have happened in my life. And in fact, there has been in the last 6 months, my aunt died of cancer. I lost a couple of best friends to rehab. I had a breakup, technology problems. So there's all kinds of issues going on. So I could have chosen that. And we're going to talk about this path today. What Dr. Kalish is going to take me down is what is likely to happen if I went to my doctor versus what my other options would be, and the long-term successes of each of them and the consequences of taking the allopathic side. So Dr. Kalish, you've been talking about this stuff for many, many years. How long have you been in practice now?
We're going on 25 years now.
Long time. So
I know, long time.
What?
It's gone by fast, though. It has gone fast.
Well, and are you still meditating like a couple hours a day?
I woke up at 3:50 this morning and I did about 3 hours. Yeah, every day.
Awesome. And how many hours of sleep do you get?
I go to bed at 9. I wake up around 4.
So that's about the 7 hours of sleep that most people aren't getting. It used to be like 9.5 or something. So sleep is pretty important. Sleep deprivation and meditation deprivation could be reasons for depression too, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the main reasons, well, we wouldn't have to talk about this today, but definitely one of the main reasons why people get depressed is because they're spiritually disconnected. But I think once people are depressed, you can't just meditate your way out of it. It's not that simple, you're saying.
Right, exactly. And so there's many layers to this. So what are your comments and what are your thoughts about the statistics now first on how many people in America, particularly, and around the world are just given a pill when they're depressed?
Well, I mean, I think that it's a business, this is kind of the primary thing to realize. I was on a conference call about 8 or 9 years ago with one of these high-end consulting firms. They analyze business. When you have billions of dollars and you try to invest it, you hire people to help you try to figure out where to put your money. I just happened to be on this call for a complicated reason. But it was basically this high-end British consulting group, consulting with this group of Americans about where to put your money, and the antidepressant market in the United States is like the global laughingstock of the world, because it's just this, like taking, lunch money from little kids or something.
Wow.
And you got to primarily understand that this is, it's a business. They're selling things and they're making billions of dollars. And there's a lot of really smart people that are behind this. And that's not a conspiracy. They're not trying to do anything different than the cigarette manufacturers were, or handgun manufacturers, or for that matter, people that make Barbie dolls. I mean, everyone's just trying to make things and sell them. People are producing antidepressant drugs, and there's a really huge potential market for us here in the United States. And we're a little gullible, a little susceptible, and we allow TV advertising for the drugs. So it's an excellent marketplace for the drug companies to exploit. And I think that's probably the main driving force in all of this, is the money that's being made. And unfortunately, it's being made at the expense of, our mental health. And it's certainly not serving our mental health by any means to overuse these drugs in the ways that we are now.
Right. And Dr. Dan, you train several doctors, is that right?
I have a training program. The Kalish Institute. We train a couple hundred doctors a year in how to do functional medicine, basically. A large component of that is working with the brain.
So you do talk to a lot of these doctors when you're training them about the other path, the other option to these drugs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a big part of our program. We have a whole module on the brain where we talk about neurotransmitters, how to test for them, how to correct them using natural products.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so obviously, you guys, Dr. Dan Kalish is very, very knowledgeable on this topic. So let's go deeper. Today, it's popular. I mean, I think it is that America is the only country that allows drug advertisements in between TV shows. Is that right? Are we still the only country?
Yeah, there's one or two others. I just saw this the other day. I forget where it is. It's like somewhere obscure, like New Zealand or something like that. But we're one of the few. And you've got to realize that most of the other countries of the world that are, first world countries have socialized medicine. So they're not interested in over-prescribing drugs. In fact, their healthcare systems are set up to try to save money by not prescribing drugs, where in our country, because we do not have socialized medicine, it's the more the merrier in terms of selling medications. There's a financial incentive in our country to get drugs out on the street and into the hands of consumers who are being duped, basically.
Right. And it's that 2-week description, for 2 weeks, we're upset, we're depressed, we're gaining weight. Do you think that that's a fair description of what would categorize someone as depressed and needing a medication?
Yeah, well, I mean, these drugs were originally designed for moderate to severe depression. So moderate to severe depression, it's not like what we usually think about. That's I'm not getting out of bed, I haven't taken a shower in a few weeks, I haven't shopped for food or cooked or done anything. These are people who are, in the official sort of psychiatric term of depression, they're impaired. They're not able to conduct the normal daily activities. They're not driving their kids to school. A lot of times they're not even, literally leaving their bedroom. So, those people who are moderately or severely depressed obviously need psychiatric help, and these drugs have a place in a psychiatric hospital or psychiatric setting. But I think what happened is that, we developed these drugs originally for that patient population who are non-functional, basically. And then we just started to continually loosen the rules and loosen the rules and loosen the rules, start to throw kids into the mix until it became that just about anybody can take an antidepressant. This is a true story. I was in practice in San Francisco about 10 years ago, and a young woman came in, maybe 30, 32 years old. She was a researcher at UCSF, incredibly smart scientist, and she had this prescription in her hand, and she had a box, a little thing of Prozac that she had just picked up. And she said, this is a true story. This is how scary this is. I went to see my doctor a few days ago, and I told him that I have this toenail fungus, and it's really bothering me. I'm upset about it, and I'm wondering what we can do to help with this toenail fungus. And that her medical doctor didn't know what to do about the toenail fungus, but said, I think you're depressed and anxious, and gave her a prescription for Prozac. This is a true story. And she went to the pharmacy, she fulfilled the prescription, she didn't start taking it. She grabbed the prescription and she decided, I'm going to see some natural health guy. And she scheduled and came in to see me. And I'm looking at this, incredibly intelligent science person, and we just had to talk about it. And she realized, no, you're right. I mean, the power of doctors when they prescribe, even if you're a really well-educated, really sophisticated scientist, it's just like, oh, maybe I do need this. And as soon as we talked about it for like 5 or 10 minutes, it was obvious, okay, no, let's deal with the toenail fungus. I mean, that's what's going on here. You don't have, and I mean, I know that sounds insane, but when I have these conversations every day with people, it's getting to the point where, we're prescribing these drugs really for just about anything. And women are targeted really heavily, I'm telling you, because women, I don't know why they're targeted heavily, but it's very easy for doctors to jump from toenail fungus to she's depressed in a different way than they would with a man. You pretty consistently see that pattern. Like it's all in her head kind of thinking is prevalent.
We're easily swayed because I work with primarily women, and I think you probably do too. And hormonally, we're just so much more sensitive, and we get to this point where I think adrenal fatigue is more common with us anyway too. It's so. You said something about and it makes me think of, I know Kardashians, but it's like the popularity now is it due to our fast-paced world that yields more depressed humans, or is it the autonomy of drug companies to sell them to us, like when we're sitting in this sedentary and probably the most depressed state on the couch watching artificial TV shows to encourage us to keep up with the fabricated Kardashians, like if you're not more like them, in this commercial in between breaks, if you're not like them, then you should take this drug and you'll feel better that you're not like these stars, and you'll have, and you should feel guilty that you don't have near the money that they have. So,
Well, I think both these things are happening at the same time. The marketplace is expanding because there's also more depressed people. Even if you tighten up the rules on who you consider depressed, it's definitely increasing just in the exact same way as global warming, climate change is increasing, as environmental toxicity is increasing. The human brain is subject to outside forces, and the same exact chemicals and compounds that are destroying the environment get into our bodies, get into our brains, and damage our brains. So we're part of this natural environment. You can't isolate your brain and protect it from mercury, lead, cadmium, PCBs, DDT, and all the other stuff floating around out there. And chemical toxins and heavy metals easily enter into the brain and end up causing depression, along with, as like dietary problems, inflammatory foods, all these other things that are triggering brain problems. So definitely depression is on the rise, not as a mental health disorder. I don't think people are getting crazier, but as a consequence of our lifestyles and the way that we're treating this planet, it's just not going to last very long. I mean, anyone with a little bit of common sense. I was out yesterday on my bicycle, and because I ride my bike to work and back, and I was just standing there, and there was like 3 buses going by and 2 trucks and all these cars, and everyone's honking and all this exhaust spewing everywhere. And you just realize what am I going to take a deep breath now? Like how's that going to work? How's my brain going to do, riding a bike in traffic? So we're under some pretty serious pressures right now, the way that we've treated this planet, it's ricocheting and bam, hitting us right in the head.
Totally. It's like and I was in solar for a while, and I still sort of am on the side, but this global warming concept, it's like looking at our bodies. It's like we have this, internal global warming and inflammation and acidity and hence inability to break down food and digest things and create new hormones and filter neurotransmitters appropriately. So it's so true. It's like when we look at our outside world, then it's truly reflective of our inside world and vice versa. So, and life is how we see it, of course, too. So it's like people can be optimistic even when they're not super healthy either, because they just have a different frame of mind. But let's just say I'm the person who, and here we are, I'm going to just act as though you're my allopathic doctor, you're my general physician, and I'm coming into your office and I say, hello, Dr. Kalish. I'm not feeling very hot these days. I'm upset. My aunt just passed away of cancer. Life is it just feels like there's just too much right now. And I feel, I saw this drug commercial, and I'm wondering if it's something that I should look into. What would it look like if you were my doctor, my GP?
Well, I think, a lot of my good friends are medical doctors, and they're put in this position a lot. Well, the ones that are integrative aren't, but the ones that are working in conventional settings, unfortunately, they're like under pressure, social pressure from their patients to do something, and they have 6 to 8 minutes typically in their schedule to figure out what's going on with a person and come up with a treatment and execute the treatment and deliver everything. And so, because we get all these doctors coming from conventional medicine to sign up for my training program because they don't like the situation that they're being put in by the insurance companies and by our whole medical system. And so they don't have the time or capacity to talk about diet, exercise, sleep, emotional counseling work and therapy work like a doctor would have done in the past. It's like, how you doing, Jane? What can we do to get you into the right kind of group that could help you process your mother's death, or whatever the things are that are going on for the person? And so I think well-intended physicians now are just being railroaded into the only other thing that they can do, which is to prescribe a drug. And the really smart ones that are science-based realize that there's not a lot of hope that an antidepressant is going to solve that complicated of a problem, but they're also trapped and unable to do anything else because they just can't. So, we get a lot of doctors like this that are ready to leave conventional medicine because they're just fed up with an approach that they know is not going to work. But typically what happens is, they got 6 minutes, they got to listen really quick, figure out what's going on, make sure you're not having a heart attack or you're dying from anything and you don't have a brain tumor, and then, write a prescription as you're heading out the door. And usually there's very little follow-up, and there's very little tracking of people, once all this happens, unless, of course, the program's not going well or the person's really having a lot of side effects. And, this happens millions of times every year in the United States right now. It's sad, but I used to, in my early years of my career, I was upset with the physicians who are doing this. But now that I know so many of them and they're friends of mine, now I feel like the physicians are kind of as much victims of this whole system as the patients are. They really are. And the well-intentioned physicians, who are the majority of these people, are just fed up, and they want to do something different. And that's fueling the growth of integrative medicine right now, which is exciting in a way.
That's incredible. And it's hard for me to talk negatively about people, because when you keep looking at all of the tools that they're given, they're given these ranges and these labs, and you use these, and these are your tools for prescriptions. This is how you fix it. And they're just kind of puppets of something that they didn't think that they were signing up for. And I myself have some physicians as clients and or our patients, because I work in several doctors' offices too. And I hear the same thing. So it's, even when our clients come to me and to us, I say, be careful what you say about this doctor, because a little bit of empathy here, because a lot of them are well-intentioned. They just don't know anything different. And a lot of them are changing a lot. I have a lot of nurse clients too who are becoming fed up. So would you, as my physician, if I came in and said, I am upset, I'm depressed, I think I want this drug, my girlfriends are taking it, I just can't get through life, would you, because I know that you're under oath as doctors, we're the doctors that are prescribing these drugs, they're responsible to discuss the risks, the biochemical individuality of these drugs and the benefits and the alternative when they're prescribing drugs. So in 6 to 8 minutes, are these doctors able to accomplish these things? In other words, would you be able to, I'm coming into you, would you be able to take that much time to go through, oh, well, here's the risk, here's the side effects, here's the long-term, here's the other options?
I don't think that's ever really discussed, There's simply not enough time, There isn't. I don't think people, and then I think in the old days, you might have gotten that kind of a discussion with a pharmacist too. When you went to pick up your drug, they would sit you down for a half an hour and talk with you. But I don't think that happens very often anymore either. But then the other problem is that, there's a pretty big push on the consumer side to get access to these drugs because of the advertising. So it's a mixed bag, everyone's a little bit culpable. I think the drug companies for providing the drugs and pushing them so hard and advertising, people are because they want a single pill solution and a quick fix. Insurance companies, because they're kind of covering the cost of all this. The cost is hidden from us, although obviously we're all paying for it, and then the doctors, it's a very strange system of collusion in some weird way. I think that's why it's gone on for so long and why it's been so financially lucrative for so many people. And there's a long history of this too, right? People have been selling drugs for centuries. The British got the entire country of China hooked on heroin, right? And this has been going on for long periods. Oh no, opium. I'm sorry, it was opium wars. Got them hooked on opium. There's been a long history of this sort of combination of politics and economics using addictive drugs that are numbing in a way, like opium is, or like the antidepressants are. And I think that's a lot of the effect of these drugs too, is that they just kind of numb people out.
Right.
They don't make them necessarily chipper and happy and healthy. Right?
That's the next thing I wanted to ask you as your patient. Still role playing is, we can't selectively numb, so we're taking these medications, and I know a lot of people, including personal story, but there's a guy that a year ago, I started dating him, and we just had a great time, and I was really interested in him, and then probably a couple of months into it, he was just very distant, and he was on antidepressants, and he said, I can't get into any relationship I can be serious about anyone because I don't ever want to feel the way I did when I had my last breakup, and I've been on antidepressants since, and I'm never getting off of them, and I'm never getting into a relationship again. And I was like, well, okay. And so I'm seeing a lot of men like this, and in a way of course it hurt me because I really liked him. But then the next thing I thought was, gosh, there's got to be some really long-term negative side effects, because I saw him have a knee injury and go through surgery. And then I've seen him gain weight, and I've seen him drink excessively, and it's not been pretty. So I know that there's a ton of side effects, and biochemical individuality is different for each person. So if we could go through, the most common side effects that you're seeing that I should consider before I get on an antidepressant, what are the main things that you would talk with me about?
Well, one of my early teachers was a doctor named R.D. Laing. He's a really famous psychiatrist in the 1960s, 70s. And one of the things he said, I'll never forget, he said, this old guy with a British accent saying this, is there's no such thing as side effects. And then he stops and looks at you. They're all just effects. And that's a really good point. So when we say they're side effects, it almost sounds like they're afterthoughts, like they're the unintended consequences. But the drugs are the drugs effects, right? And you can't really separate out like, oh, that's the effect that we want, and those are the effects we don't want, because they're all mixed in together. And in fact, with these kinds of medications, probably the side effects are more prominent than the actual effects. So the research shows that, and this is in the best of circumstances, somewhere between 8 and 12% of people that take these drugs actually benefit from them. That leaves like 88 to 92% of people that don't get much benefit. When you get into the elderly population and you get 65-year-olds and over, the effect drops to about 0. They're about the same as placebo.
Wow.
So the placebo effect of someone who thinks they're on an antidepressant is about a 30 to 40% improvement. So when you see research studies, it'll often say like, oh, this drug is like 50% effective. Okay, well, 8 to 12% of the time, that's the effect of the actual drug. And 30 to 40% of the time, that's the effect of just taking the drug, thinking that you're taking the drug, even though you're not taking it. And so that kind of goes to show that the power of your own mind is actually stronger than the power of any of these medications. So given that the positive side of this is pretty small, average maybe 10% of people benefit from it. When you look at all the other effects like loss of sexual activity, different kinds of receptor site problems. So when you take these medications, they impact the cell receptor sites in the brain, and you can have topographical or structural changes in the brain cells themselves. There can be dependency problems with the medications where brain cells change their structure, and then when the drug is withdrawn, it's very hard for the person to feel normal again. So there's a lot of potential long-term side effects, short-term side effects as well. Most of the people that I work with, we usually see a few years into, let's say they take the drug initially and it helps a little bit or maybe a lot, usually see the drug becoming less and less effective over time as well, which is another problem. So doctors then need to escalate dosages upward or switch over to a different kind of medication. So, I mean, if the drugs always worked or consistently worked and didn't have much in the way of side effects, the whole situation would be fine. Wouldn't have to worry about it. But I just think that they've been overblown. The success of these medications has been overblown. And then the long-term outcome studies, when you look at how these drugs fare for people over the course of years and years and years, is all pretty grim. Short-term research is maybe not so bad. 6 weeks, 8 weeks, a couple of months when you track people, because you don't see the real problems showing up right away. But all the long-term studies, if you look at them collectively, are pretty negative in terms of the effect of these. Except in people for whom these drugs are appropriate, which are people who, like I mentioned earlier, if you have moderate or severe depression, then these can be really effective treatments. But we're not using them in that way any longer. So the people we're talking about are, I just split up with my girlfriend people, if the person's no longer bathing, showering, getting their hair cut, or feeding themselves, that's one thing. But if they're just kind of bummed out because they split up with someone, or because their transmission in their car broke and they can't afford to fix it, or just normal life stuff is happening, it really was never the intention to use these drugs that way in the first place.
Right. So can we talk about the consequences long term, so that are unintended for people who transmission broke down? My favorite ice cream at the store is out of stock. I didn't sleep very well last night, and my dog isn't eating their food. So just a couple of little normal things. But for that type of situation, for someone who is taking these for a long time, what are some of the things that are maybe irreparable in the body that maybe we don't even know yet they're irreparable, but in studies that we're estimating that are?
Well, there's really consistent patterns to all this, and this is pretty well researched. They've known this for, I don't know, probably at least 20 years, is that the way that the drugs work is that they block the reuptake of key brain chemicals. Some of them act on serotonin, some act on epinephrine and norepinephrine, but the basic mechanism is the same. They're called reuptake inhibitors. So if you imagine you have two brain cells, one brain cell is making a chemical and squirting it out, and then it's hitting the other brain cell, and then that brain cell fires, does something, makes you think about something or whatever, have a feeling. And so these drugs, when that first cell makes a neurotransmitter and squirts it out into the space between the cells, that normally once the brain chemical has done its job, it goes back and is recycled into the cell that made it. And it's done. The recycling is done through these reuptake ports, or they're sometimes called transporters or organic cation. The technical term is like organic cation transporters type 2, but most people call them reuptake ports. And it's like a vacuum cleaner basically. Imagine your brain cell has a little vacuum cleaner on the edge of it, and it just sucks that chemical that it made right back into the brain cell, and then it can store the chemical, protect it, keep it inside the cell so it can use it again. It's a beautiful recycling system. So the drugs work by basically blocking the reuptake port. They block the ability of the brain cell to pull the chemical back in. So then the brain chemicals stay outside the cell because they can't get back in where they came from, right? And so they're more biologically active and they can do more things when they're outside the cell. But part of the story is that the reason your body recycles them in the first place and pulls them back is because inside the cell they're protected. outside the cell, there are enzymes out there, like little sharks, just going around chomping on your neurotransmitters. So when you force the neurotransmitters to stay outside the cell, these enzymes break them down. So the actual drug that you're taking lowers the brain chemicals that the drug that you're taking is trying to manipulate. That's not very common. Whatever you think about modern medicine, this is a real snafu, right? Because the actual medication, by necessity, lowers the chemical that the medication is attempting to manipulate. And that's inevitable with every single SSRI on the market. It's not like and this is not an alternative medicine idea. This is just like basic physiology, brain physiology, science stuff. And so the longer you're on these medications, the lower your serotonin and dopamine levels will go ultimately. That's why eventually the drugs don't work as well. And so
yeah, so this is long term then, right? I mean, will the brain and the body, because, you know, the last interview I did with you, I know we talked about like 90% or so of serotonin is actually made outside of the brain. So can it permanently paralyze our body's ability to make those neurotransmitters? Well,
it's more like it empties out your levels, and you could, if you're smart enough, bring your levels back up with an amino acid based program. So whatever nutrient or whatever brain chemicals these medications deplete can be replaced if you're a really smart functional medicine doctor, you know how to do all that. So it's not a permanent forever kind of problem, but most people take these medications, the medications stop working. They usually just stay on the drugs because they feel even worse if they get off of them. And they're just kind of stuck in this never land. And so it's pretty rare to see people who take the medications and then find the right kind of doctor who can actually rebuild everything, because there's not that many people that are trained in how to do this yet. So most people are out there walking around either on a drug that's not working that well anymore or off of the medication and still not feeling great.
And that's when you might see things like shootings and stuff. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely people, and I don't know how accurate this is, but there's definitely people who link a lot of the shootings, especially school shootings, you know, and younger people, because younger people seem to have stronger suicidal reactions and violent reactions to these drugs. Younger being like teenage years. That seems to be, I'm not sure why the adolescent brain reacts even more strongly. But certainly people start to get really strange thoughts, you know, when they're young and they're placed on these medications. There's a big effect on the brain.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that. I think there's actually a SSRI studies or something like that. There was some kind of website that talked about all that. So, and that's just it, is that people don't know that there's doctors like you out there. So they're just stuck and they kind of feel zombified and everything. So I know, I don't know if Dr. Kalish, have you heard of the study that they did? I saw multiple places, and I actually read through some of the study that women who are in their third trimester and who are on antidepressants have an 86% chance of increased risk of having a baby born to autism. Have you heard that?
I have not read that. No, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely manipulating brain chemicals, it's just a bad idea to take any of these things when you're pregnant. You know?
Yeah.
But I think they're generally considered safe. I think that, you know, they have sort of levels of classifications of drugs and how safe they are to take when you're pregnant. And then antidepressants. So I think that's probably pretty common.
Yeah, I agree. And then there's the postpartum stuff. I know there's one of the things that, you know, I talk a lot about birth control. I talk a lot about women and finding a safe route for it, because a lot of the synthetic hormones that we take for birth control can actually lead to mood alterations in some women. So can you comment on that, since, you know, going back to my role playing, I'm on birth control and I'm depressed and I think I have a thyroid problem, but I'm not really sure because I've never really been tested.
Well, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think birth control, I mean, if it's a young woman and it's the only way that she's going to not get pregnant and she doesn't want to be pregnant, that's, you know, maybe acceptable. But what we often see, in other words, you have to judge the negative effect of taking the birth control versus having unwanted pregnancy. But what we see, you know, frequently is women who, you know, have other alternatives. They could use other things for birth control, or women who are using birth control pills as a way to try to regulate their cycle. And we see this with girls as young as like 14. If you have a lot of really bad PMS type problems, it puts them on birth control, not because they're sexually active, but because they want to try to improve their cycle. And I've been doing these female hormone programs for 25 years, and this is one area where it's really clear that the natural treatments are way safer and work a lot better. No contest, so it's relatively straightforward using some of these natural treatments to correct female hormone imbalances. And in some things in integrative medicine, it's kind of equally yoked, like, oh, maybe the alternative treatment and the conventional treatment work about the same. But in this case, it's definitely much more successful outcomes. And we also find a lot of women who are depressed in relation to progesterone or estrogen-related problems. And when we sort out the progesterone or estrogen issues, all of a sudden their mood issues are completely gone. It's actually relatively common.
Yeah, so that's a root cause. I know a lot of women who, birth control made them crazy, and then they talk about B12 deficiency and B vitamin deficiencies being a very common side effect of birth control and the synthetic drugs. So if I'm just going to play the role of me again and say, I'm on birth control, but I'm thinking about getting off of it and trying something different. So do you have any recommendations for me?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we do these month-long hormone panels. Once you're off of birth control for 1 or 2 months, you can do these saliva samples for a month and map out your progesterone and estrogen production over the course of a month. And then based on that test, we can reset the monthly cycle. And that helps with fertility problems, it helps with hormone-related migraines, helps with PMS, PCOS, all these kinds of conditions. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's I don't want to say it's easy, but it's really straightforward to correct those kinds of female hormone problems using functional medicine. We're quite successful doing that.
Yeah, and then you think about how long women are on birth control. I've known some clients that we've worked with like 20, 30 years, and they're still in their 50s, and they've already experienced like premenopause, and they're on them still. And I'm like, what are you doing still on them? Well, I'm really sad and depressed. It's almost like birth control medications being used as an antidepressant as well. In fact, segueing over to my mom is, when she was experiencing some menopausal issues, her doctor was like, oh, well, I'm going to write you this prescription for an antidepressant. My mom was like, well, I didn't say I was depressed. I just said I was going through menopause. And I just said I wanted to learn how to correct it a little bit. And they were pretty suggestive that she took it. But because of some of the things that she'd talked to me about, she's like, I'm going to talk to my daughter first. And she didn't take it. So it's like, high five, Mom, because I don't know. She could have been one of those on it for the long haul, like everybody's taking PPIs in their upper 60s, statins and things too. So, that too, inflammation, can you comment on that, Dr. Kalish, that there's a lot of people talking about how depression can be really just rooted in inflammation in our body, just being imbalanced. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so if we separate out psychiatric cases, people who need to be in a hospital, then I think our average day-to-day depression type cases, pretty much 100% of them have inflammation at the root cause of the problem. Now, that's a pretty broad subject, though, because inflammation can damage your thyroid, and that can make you depressed. Inflammation can strip out all your vitamin D, and you can be depressed because you have a vitamin D deficiency. Inflammation can ruin your adrenal glands, your estrogen, your progesterone, and testosterone. You can be depressed because you have no stress hormones and no sex hormones. And probably the worst of all this is inflammation can directly impact your brain. And we do these lab tests in functional medicine called organic acids tests, where we can measure whether your brain is inflamed and whether your depression, anxiety, or mood problem is directly related to brain inflammation or not. And it's pretty incredible technology. You can actually do all this with a urine test, So organic acids testing in my practice now, I run it on every new patient. It's really opened up this window where we can see, okay, you're depressed because you're inflamed, or okay, you're depressed because you're stressed, or you're depressed because you're thyroid, or whatever it may be. I think that's the differential diagnosis you need to make is figure out where the inflammation is coming from, how the inflammation is affecting the body, and then ultimately, of course, we always try to resolve the inflammatory problem itself, which could be gluten, could be an infection, could be a toxin, could be emotional stress, etc., and fix whatever problem the inflammation has caused. And really interesting thing is that we make our brain chemicals, serotonin and dopamine epinephrine, norepinephrine. We make them all from amino acids. And these same exact amino acids are used to produce cytokines. And cytokines are what we make when we're inflamed. So if you're really inflamed and you're making a lot of cytokines, the amino acids that you use to make your brain chemicals are going to be making cytokines, and there's only a certain amount of them to go around. So if you have like 100 units of 5-HTP in your body, and you have to make a bunch of these cytokines, you're not going to have that 100 units of 5-HTP to make the serotonin. So we see a direct relationship instantaneously between between body chemicals. The inflammation goes up, the brain chemicals drop, just like that. And then of course, people get depressed. And they're depressed because they're inflamed, not because they have a deep psychological crisis or problem necessarily.
Right, right. And these people that are coming to you, Dr. Kalish, are you doing, are a lot of these people on antidepressants already? And then you're helping them?
Yeah. So that's an important thing to bring up. So if you're already on an antidepressant, don't stop taking it. Worst thing you can do is stop taking it, because people can crash if they stop these medications. So people come to us and they're already on a drug. We always hold that part steady, do all the lab testing, get everything fixed, and then when they're healthier, they can go back to their regular doctor and taper off the drug. But it's dangerous to get off an antidepressant by yourself or really quickly, so you have to be careful about that. You want to have a plan B in place, right? You want to have you want to have corrected most of the things that are a problem before you just all of a sudden stop taking a drug.
Right, right. And the doctors, I mean, how long would that you've seen, how long does it take these people to get off of antidepressants when they're working with you and doing the things that might may have been the root of the depression to begin with, and you're correcting those?
Like a year or two, probably.
Wow, that sounds like a long time. I feel like it's a long time.
Yeah. Well, a year goes pretty fast. You got to go slowly though, because people can get worse if they try to do it too fast.
Yeah, especially considering like back in the good old days in the 1960s, it used to take, I don't know, 3-6 months from what I've read when they're working with a psychotherapist or psychologist on getting through maybe some emotional struggles. And that was back before food got really inflammable, highly inflammable. So you had just listed several things that could be the root cause of depression, and there's so many, and I'm glad that you listed those ones. The things that you would take me down in the path of, instead of allopathy. So let's say I was coming to you and you were the functional medicine doctor, and you've already talked about some of the tests that you would run. What are some of the things that you would have me do outside of your office that you feel as though would help me be happier and to curb my depression, so that as I'm coming off of these meds, or maybe if I'm not even on these meds yet, it would gradually help me pave a way toward a happier life?
There's usually 4 big categories. Exercise is the most basic, and there's been a fair number of studies that just basically exercise works better to prevent depression than antidepressants do, that's for sure. It's not the easiest thing. Some people over-exercise. When you say exercise, people either love it or hate it, so that one takes a lot of negotiation and struggle. But we do want to get people fit, and I do find that when people are extremely physically fit, they're much likely to be happy, clearly. The second big category is sleep, and this is usually the hardest one, to get people to go to bed on time. Basically, whether you're 10 years old or 12 years old, or 40 or 50 or 60 years old, we're supposed to be in bed by about 9 p.m. There's a little window in there for teenagers where our hormones change quite a bit. So if you're a teenager and you're listening to this, 11 p.m. is totally fine. If you're anything other than a teenager, then basically you should be asleep, lights out. And that turns out to be one of the hardest parts of my job, convincing people to go to bed earlier. People just won't go to bed on time. It's amazing. People will eat anything you tell them to. They'll work out and do CrossFit, but they won't go to bed on time. So anyways, that's a big one.
Why do we think that is?
I have a personal theory about it. Like if you've ever been around little kids, like 5-6-year-old kids, they're tired and they're up too late, and you ask a kid who's 5 or 6, "Oh, you're tired." What do they say universally?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Exactly. 100% of kids will just say, "I'm not tired. I'm not tired." And I think for some reason we're conditioned in our culture to not admit that we're tired. And so when it's 8:30 tonight, those of you listening to this, and you start to get tired, which everyone does right around 8:30, just go to bed and you'll be asleep by 9. But what do? We're like, I'm not tired. I'm going to watch another episode of Scandal, or I'm going to stay up and I got to do all that email thing I forgot to do for work, or, I better start the laundry now because I got, whatever it is that we do between 9 and 11. One of my friends said this to me when my son I have a teenage son, he wanted to go out. And I was like, what time should I make his curfew to come home? And she looked at me, she said, nothing good happens after 11 p.m. I was like, okay, we'll get him back at 11. It's probably true. But, for adults who need to sleep, 9 p.m. is just, you got to be in bed and lights out. But what happens is around 8:30, we start to get tired naturally and start to dip down. Like little kids, we see this happen to also. And if you just go to bed, you go to bed. But if you power through that 8:30 to 9 p.m. window, boom, it's 9:30, and you're ready for like a third episode of your binge watch on Netflix, or you're ready to do all those emails that you didn't get to. And, the afterburners kind of kick in, and we make all this stress hormone stuff comes up, and then your whole sleep cycle gets thrashed. So anyways, that's the hardest one to fix. And I like to talk about it, not that anyone ever listens to me or does it, because no one ever does, but at least I can bring it up. And then if people aren't getting better, I can tell them that's why. But
Dr. Kalish, too, on that one, because I know people are going to ask, is can I go to bed and sleep well, first of all, how many hours of sleep would you recommend minimum? And then there's ideal. And then there's what time does it matter what time I go to bed? Because you did say 9-11, but why is that important?
9 p.m. You have to be asleep by 9 p.m. Because our hormones are set up on a circadian rhythm, right? There's this 24-hour cycle. And an hour or two after it gets dark, everything is shutting down. And if you're not asleep at that time, you're going to miss out on all the immune repair. So if you do what I do, just do what I do. You sleep from 9 p.m. and wake up whenever. It doesn't matter. Sometimes they wake up at 2 in the morning. It doesn't matter. If you're getting the quality of sleep that you need between 9 p.m. and midnight or so, you don't need that much more sleep. But if you're going to bed at 11 or 12, even if you sleep 8, 9, 10 hours, it's not going to be as restful as if you went to bed at 9.
But what if you're not tired at 9?
Then you're in denial. It's like we're right back to the little kid thing. I'm not tired. You're just not listening to your body.
Right.
Or maybe you're a night person. Maybe your physiology evolved on a different planet. Okay.
That's what we all hear that so much as a practitioner. I think I'm just a night person. I've always been a night person. I'm like,
hey, maybe there's some other planet that they came from. But if you're from this planet, basically we have a 24-hour rhythm. It's pretty much the way the whole planet's set up. And so everyone has hormone rhythms that fall into this. But there's a lot of I'm not tired, right? Those are I'm a night person. I'm not tired. It's night. Why would I go to bed at night? I'm not even tired. People aren't listening to their natural rhythms. Now, the other thing is, if you wake up at 4 every morning, which I do, guess what? By 9 o'clock, you're going to be really tired.
Right.
Because you've been up for a really long time. The other thing is, if you wake up at 4 and you meditate for 2 or 3 hours, you get all kinds of restorative rest processes happening as a result of the meditation, which makes up for the fact that I'm only sleeping 6 or 7 hours. Now, if I just went to bed at 9 and woke up at 4 and then started doing work or watched TV or something, then it wouldn't work. But if you go to bed at 9, wake up at 4, you meditate for an hour, 40 minutes, whatever, your amount of rest and restoration that you're going to build is going to be greater than if you went to bed at midnight and slept in until like 10. So you can't cheat these windows. We're hardwired for this. You can't work around this. Now, if you're questioning this and you think this is insane, just think about any child you've ever known. 5-year-old, 10-year-old, put them to bed with you as a parent, put them to bed at midnight and say, oh, they're just going to sleep in and think that's going to work. No parent does that. You know why? Because you try that once or twice and they're just like an insane, irritable, horrible human being for several days because you kept them up too late. And so I think, at least for myself as a parent, due to my own self-preservation, I started to put my son to bed early or on time, right? Now, when he was 5 or 6 years old, would I have kept him up to midnight, give him a sleeping pill, and then hope he slept until 10? No, that's insane. It's no different for adults. You just think about how we treat children. It's the same thing.
Yeah, true. And it would mean being in bed, not with an EMF in front of you, like a phone that actually can disrupt melatonin cycles too. So more like just chilling out in bed and allowing your sleep cycles to take place, right?
Yeah, and if you had an 8-year-old kid who was sick and was chronically fatigued and a little depressed and had the flu or something, would you let him stay up until 1 in the morning? Probably not. You'd probably say, look, Johnny, you're tired. You're sick. Go to bed. It's 8:30. It's 9. It's the same exact thing.
Right, right. So sleep, we nailed that one. Exercise, and what are the other two?
They get easier and then harder. Meditation, and that's kind of what it is. That's a challenge for all of us. And then what you're eating, what you're doing with your food. Whether you're paleo or vegan, whatever you decide to do with your food life, At this point in my career, I don't even know if it really matters. As long as we get the diet dialed in properly, whether you want to be a paleo, great. You want to be a vegan, I totally support that. As long as we figure out how it's going to work for you,
Yeah. Why do you say it like that, Dr. Kalish? At this point in my career, I don't even know it works. Like it sounds like you kind of threw in the towel like I've been feeling lately.
Yeah, because nobody really knows, and any diet can work for anybody if you do it right. There is no right way to eat. Even for an individual, I eat right now just like I did when I was 18 to 25 years of age. But between 25 and 50, I did all kinds of other things. I don't know why I stopped eating that way. I felt great on it. But now I'm back to eating the way I did at age 20. I feel better than I have ever. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I went through my phases. I did my paleo. I did my raw foods. I did my raw milk. I did my raw butter. I did all that stuff. Kind of been there, done that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun to experiment, and our body may crave different things different times and seasonally. And that's the thing that I always tell people, just try not to get married to one thing, because your body's going to change and crave different things. So try not to get stuck in the dogma. And the last question I have for you, because we're about up to time now, is, you're like the master at meditation. Like if there was a competition in meditation, you probably like kick ass and win. So where would you recommend people get started to meditate, even if it's for like 5 or 10 minutes, because 3 hours is a lot of time. So what could they do to start trying a shorter time period when they first wake up in the morning?
Yeah, first of all, 3 hours is like, it's not an accomplishment, it's a requirement, I don't meditate for 3 hours a day. How could I say it? I do it because I have to, and so not because I think it's a good idea. And so, and I started meditating when I was 18. I lived in a Zen monastery in Japan. And I think my first, my first 10 years of meditation were characterized by just personal suffering and physical pain and general grumpiness and unhappiness. So you're just sitting there for an hour, just kind of pissed off at your own mind because you can't figure out how to stop thinking. That's not very fun. So it's not very entertaining in the beginning. It's kind of like a struggle. And then around the 10-year mark, I started to realize, I think I just had about 5 minutes there when my brain turned off, and then that's built over time. And now I can turn my brain off for 2 or 3 hours at a time, which is great. But, it took me 34 years to figure that out. So it's not something that happens real fast. So I think in the beginning, for most people who start to meditate, you're going to be sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes and your mind is going to be racing. And the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to just notice how screwed up you are and the fact that you can't stop your brain from thinking. It's like if you've ever been on the internet, I'm reading a New York Times article, and then I think about, I wonder what the Aston Martin is selling for now. And then I'm like, I wonder about the James Bond movie. And then I think, I wonder what's happening with the election. Like that, you're on the internet kind of acting like a crazy person. But our brains do that on their own, right? They generate thoughts that have very little meaning or quality to them. And then that thought generates another thought. And then we start to think that the thoughts are real. And I think the main thing with meditation is to start to watch your thoughts, and then you'll realize at some point that the vast majority, probably 99% of your thoughts are repetitive. You've had them before, not very interesting. Even if you shared them with someone else, the other person would probably not be fascinated by it. They're just not valuable. And that the brain, when it's not thinking, can do other things. So if you're not constantly thinking all the time, your brain has the capacity to enter into deep states of, I guess we call meditation, or to become more emotionally and spiritually connected. And that's what you see, like my cousin just had a baby. You look at a newborn baby, They don't have any language skills. They're not having thoughts like we could imagine them because they don't even know what words are yet, but they're very present and they're just being. So we're talking about returning to this sort of beingness. Is it hard? Well, I don't know, newborn babies do it. It's not that hard, but it involves, cutting through a lot of chatter. So I usually suggest for patients 5 or 10 minutes once a day, and to start to watch the thoughts and watch your breathing and start to get a sense of how absolutely ridiculous most of what your brain is doing is. And once you kind of get a grip on that and you realize this guy's right, I think the average person has like 70,000 thoughts a day. Cut it down to 20,000, just try to reduce it so that you have time in nature, or this is another way to do it. It's what I'm doing now for my evening meditation, because I do my couple 3 hours in the morning, and in the evening, and I'm going to do this pretty soon actually, in a few hours from now, and this has worked really well, I take a 1 hour walk in nature. And I have these really beautiful redwood parks near my home here in California, and hop in the car for 5-10 minutes, get on the trail, and an hour walk through the trees. It's as good as my morning meditation for, again, turning off the thinking process and just watching the path, watching the trees. Yesterday I saw a rabbit, kind of cool, just putting yourself in a different pace and not thinking about, my email, not thinking about the latest blog post that I need to write or someone that I need to call, just getting out of the thinking process and putting yourself in a more natural state.
That's my favorite thing. That's been my favorite thing lately is just, and the more that I've meditated, I've been a yogi since I was 20 and I'm 37 now, so 17 years. And they say that the longer our breath cycles, the longer someone's life expectancy is, because we're just more mellow and calm. And like you said, there's more space for things to flow in and to just completely exist in this present moment right now in gratitude. And I can't tell you how much I laugh at this now that I'm on the outside of it, because I used to be on the inside of it of, hey, you didn't text me right back or you didn't email me right back. And now I see the other side of it, which is that 70,000 thought kind of person. The 99% of what we think is this stuff that is just completely repetitive nonsense of, I was just dealing with it last night. Oh, it takes you so long to text back. And I'm like, well, what is defined as too long? And hey, when I was with you the other day having dinner and you got a phone call, you took 2 of them when we were sitting there having dinner. So, and I didn't take out my phone from my purse one time. I don't care who is calling. Maybe it was my mom or dad in the hospital. Maybe it would have been a bigger deal, but I'm so present right now that I forget what day it is sometimes. And that makes me a happier person. And I think it's just like Dr. Kalish said, it's not took him a few decades to get to this point of meditation, but it's an active practice, not yoga, meditative competition. It's just the observation and awareness. Like JP Sears said it, one of the top 3 tips he had was to be aware of what your body is saying, what it's talking, what it's saying when it's talking. And Dr. Kalish is saying most of what our body is saying in our thoughts anyway is just repetitive nonsense that isn't valuable. So when we know that and we realize how crazy our thoughts are, we could just laugh at them and just keep moving on and breathe through it. That's what I hear from you is it's not that big of a deal. Don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take that stuff so seriously, right? It sounds like.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's something else. This is the important part. They don't always tell you this. There's something else going on. Okay, it's not a matter, because when I first learned how to meditate in Japan, I thought, I'm just going to turn my brain off, and then my brain's just going to be off. But no. It's the opposite of that. When you stop all the ridiculous thoughts, your brain starts to do something else that it can only do when the thoughts are turned off. So we're not talking about, when the Zen people say empty mind or no mind, they don't really mean empty mind. They mean like massively amazing and connected to the whole galaxy mind, right? There's something deep and profound that happens when the brain is off, and you can only experience it when it's off. So I encourage people to try to get the off switch figured out, because I'm telling you, the reason why I meditate for 2 or 3 hours every day is not because I'm a holy man or something. It's because it's pretty friggin' amazing thing to do, at this point in my practice. It's like, whoa, every morning it's like this whole other level of understanding about what's really going on in the world. And it's profound what happens when your brain slows down. It's not, the cessation of thought doesn't mean there's no thought and there's nothing to replace it. This huge other wave of stuff comes in. And that's what I think we're all chasing. It's just right there.
Yes, yes, yes. And this is where, when I started doing this very thing, is meditating at night and taking time for myself and saying no to more things and saying yes to myself and my time, this restful sleep, this meditative state, and just to be with nature and my dog. I started having crazy cool dreams, like waking up going, wait, was that reality or am I in reality right now? Like, wow, that was amazing. Like different planets and different things that I just never would have imagined. And it became, it's kind of addicting, like to rest more and to dream more vividly. And it just became fun. Like you said, it's like, this is kind of like, I think what people experience when they go through like psychedelic drugs. So you could literally meditate yourself to free drugs and not have the negative side effects of it. So I'm glad that you said that, because people think, oh, well, then if I have no mind, I'm no longer human and I'm not being productive anymore. But it's a different kind of productivity. It's unlearning what we think is productive. So
it's the purpose that we're here for, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
It's not, we're not here, I don't know, to get another Amazon order in before we're dead, you know? I mean, that's not the point. And certainly not here just to, you know, do one more email. There's a deeper purpose that we're here for, and you can only discover that if your brain is off.
Right, absolutely. Well, and we got to tune off now. So I wanted to ask you one final question, which is two things. Number one, if somebody wanted to work with a functional medicine practitioner to get off of their antidepressant, where would you recommend they go for resources in their area? And then the second part is, what are the top 3 things and takeaways that you would like to recommend to our listeners today that they can start doing now that is not super difficult? And it might just be a summary of what we just talked about.
Okay, so resources, the Kalish Institute, where I train doctors, Kalish Institute.com, has a listing of practitioners that are active in our community. We've trained about 1,000 doctors. They're not all on our list, but the ones that are active are on there. The Institute of Functional Medicine has another listing. Same kind of thing, though. A lot of the great functional medicine doctors aren't on that list, but a lot of them are. Institute of Functional Medicine is a good resource as well. And then let's see, 3 take-homes. And we were talking about the brain, really. I guess the first thing is to not mess your brain up any more than it already is, right? So in that general category of things, you know, you don't want to hit your head, avoid head injuries, and you don't want to, like, a whole bunch of toxins hitting your brain. So do something to either avoid toxins, whether it's a woman who maybe goes out and buys makeup, like lipstick that doesn't have lead in it. You know, start to care about the things you're putting on your body that could potentially get in and affect you. For women, makeup is a really great way to start, because a lot of women use makeup, and it's, you know, your skin is going to absorb all the bad stuff in the bad makeup. So you want to get good quality, clean makeup. It's an easy way to go. And the same with skincare products, you know, ones that are clean. So that's it, not making things worse, right? And then on the making things better side, if you want to protect your brain, you want to do something that's safe, that's not risky in any kind of way. You want to flush toxins out. You know, so there's 2 age-old ways of doing that. One is just to hydrate really well, and the other is to do sauna or sauna therapy and flush out toxins through sweat. Those are things you don't need a doctor to do. And you drink water, doesn't take a doctor, and to, you know, go to a sauna doesn't take a doctor. But pretty effective ways to get toxins out. So stop putting the bad stuff in, get toxins out, and then if you've ever been thinking about doing a meditation practice, just start. You know, pick up a book, find a teacher, go to a group. You're not going to figure it out on your own. You need some kind of support probably for doing this. Like you said, there's all kinds of yoga groups all throughout the country now. There's plenty of opportunity to find teachers that can show you how to do a simple breathing meditation, you know, for 10 minutes a day, and make a commitment. 5 minutes a day, even if you can't do 10 minutes. When people look at me like I'm crazy, I'll say, okay, how about 2 minutes, you know? And that's enough to start. If you're doing it every day, 2 minutes can be life-changing. It doesn't have to be 2 hours.
It's true. It's just a 2 minutes of just dedicated deep belly breathing is that, to me, is enough when I feel like I'm like the panic attack state where I just feel like, oh, okay, there's too much going on at one time, and I'll just lay down on my bed, and literally 2 minutes later I'm fine. So, but that's maybe because I have a different reflex. So everyone's different, but I think those are some really powerful takeaways. So, and they're implementable. So they're basic and they can go super deep. They're wide spectrum. So Dr. Kalish, thank you so much for being who you are as a human being, just showing up as completely organic. And I notice an energy about you, and maybe it's about you or maybe it's about me, that I notice and experience you as more present, more calm, and I don't know if the word is more accepting, or maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me that's changed, because we never really know, right? But I enjoyed being present with you today, and thanks for sharing all this with our people. I think that these are the biggest takeaway is meditation for me, is the impact and the influence. I know they've done studies on that too, so they're everywhere. But if anybody needs to get a hold of Dr. Dan Kalish, you guys know how to. But enjoy your meditation this evening. It sounds like the nature thing is coming up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best part of the day.
May you see 1,000,000 bunnies on your walk.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Dan. Have a great weekend too.
Bye.